I'm Shara Shitreed. I am the social media manager at Nefesh B'Nefesh, and I also made Aliyah with younger kids, which I can't imagine anymore because 8, almost 9 years later, they're pretty much all grown up. My youngest turned 4 just as we got here, so he started in Trom Chova, which is Trom Chova, which is what is it, like 4s, 4N in the States, and the year before kindergarten. And my other 2, I had a son who went into started 2nd grade here, and a daughter who started 5th grade here. And that was back in the time where, way back in the time, back in the days where they encouraged you to put your children in Ulpan in a school in the city. At least it was that way in Modi'in. I don't know how it was in other cities, but I think it worked that way in a lot of different cities. But there was one school in the city that had the Ulpan. That was like the Ulpan was located in that school, and your kids had to get there, either be bused in. They had hasaot. They had minivans that brought the kids. They collected all the Olim kids and brought them to this school, and then they were supposed to switch to their local school mid-year, which I was not a big fan of that plan. And actually, I think that was the last year they even had that kind of Ulpan. So, Neely, your kids came the year after, or the 2 years after that?
2 years after, and they didn't do that.
And they didn't go through that, right? So Neely and I live in the same neighborhood, and her kids had a different experience than mine because, Israel is still a growing and changing and amorphous place. We're always learning and always striving to get better, and they're always trying to do something. And get better and better with services for Olim, and especially in a city like Modi'in that has a lot of Olim Chadashim. So right now they give services in local schools, and it works a lot better that way because then the kids are integrated into their local schools. So I made Aliyah in 2012. And like I said, my son just turned 4. Then I have another son who is going into 2nd grade, and a daughter going into 5th grade. And it's a challenge. It is a challenge to make Aliyah with young kids, school age kids, definitely, because you're still finding your sea legs as parents in a new country, and most people are looking for jobs. In our case, we were trying to establish ourselves midlife. Reestablish ourselves, I should say, midlife after being members of the community back in New York and Riverdale where we were living, and we left jobs, we were working, we left communities where we were very much a part of and active, and then we came here to kind of start all over again. Making friends when you're near 40 is it's an interesting challenge, and you're also trying to help your kids acclimate. So you were all in the same boat, or still are in the same boat. So we're going to hear from you how that worked. And first, we're going to hear from Alana, who's going to introduce herself. Alana Pollack made Aliyah in 2019 from Cleveland. And take it away, Alana.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ilana Pollack. And as Shara said, me and my family made Aliyah. And they keep on popping in, so sorry about that. We made Aliyah in August 2019. We made Aliyah from Cleveland, Ohio. I'm originally from Toronto. My husband's originally from Los Angeles. We both had a similar upbringing. We grew up, in Orthodox families, went to Jewish day schools, and we both grew up with the values of Aliyah, very Tzioni, and love Israel very, very much. We had hoped to possibly entertain making Aliyah when we first got married, but life put us on a different track. And then, thank God, we settled in Cleveland. We're both teachers, and it's a wonderful community in Cleveland. We got comfortable, and thank God, our kids were doing well. But at a certain point, really, my husband, who's the driving force, was like, okay, we need to decide if we're making Aliyah. It's like a bunch of years have passed. And we came on a pilot trip, and we decided it was kind of now or not for another, bunch of years, because our kids were getting older. So we made Aliyah. We made that decision, and we made Aliyah with they were almost 13 boys, and then another boy who was 9, and a daughter who was 6, now is 8, and my youngest who was 3.5. And thank God, overall we're doing great, and we're very happy with our decision. And that's the basic. That's the basic.
That's good basics. Esty, let's hear from Esty.
Hi. Okay, so my name's Esty. My husband is Ben. We both grew up in the New York. Well, I'm Metro New York. He's upstate New York. We lived there for a little while. We lived in Passaic for a little while, and then we also moved to Cleveland. And we worked. We're both teachers. My husband became the principal in Fuchs Mizrahi School in Cleveland, and I taught in the junior high and the high school. And we also, at certain points, my husband always wanted to make Aliyah. I need a little bit more convincing. Living in a community like Cleveland, where, or the Mizrahi community, I should say, where Aliyah certainly is celebrated, and shlichim, etc., from school, that was something that seemed more natural to me. And thank God we made the leap with also children ranging from age 6 to 15. I think he was 15 when we came, 10th grade. So we'll probably get into more details soon. We are currently, my husband currently is the camp director at Moshe Va'ir in New Jersey, in Teaneck, and I am getting certified to teach English here. I have a little side gig as well, like most people in Israel who have like wear 5 different hats.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of different hats, many different hats, Neely, introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Neely Engelhart, and my husband Ari and I made Aliyah in 2014 from Chicago, and we made Aliyah to Modi'in with our 4 sons. And they, similar to Alana and Esty, my oldest was 12 in 7th grade, and we had a son going into 4th grade, one going into 1st grade, and one who was 3 who went into pre-nursery. And we came to Modi'in. We both grew up in Chicago in modern Orthodox day schools, Zionistic families, camp, school, and life kind of put us on a track that we were really comfortable in our community in Chicago, involved, president of the shul, and on the board of the school, and on the board of the Bnei Akiva groups. And we kind of looked at each other one day and said, we're doing all of this work, fundraising and awareness raising about Israel, and why don't we really actually think about moving there and doing what we're trying to tell people to do? And I was the 3rd of my siblings to come. My sister and my brother were already here, so they forged the path for us, and we came with our 4 kids.
So it's something that, I mean, you and Ari must have talked about it before you one day woke up and said, we probably should go over there. I mean, your siblings had made Aliyah. I want to add also that Neely's mom recently made Aliyah, which is really, really exciting.
My mom came last year right before Corona. So that was awesome, because then she got to live with us through Corona, which is really fun. Yeah. But I think we always kind of talked about it, and it was always an ideal and always important to us, and definitely something that we had both mulled over as singles, and then got married and kind of got on a life track that had us living in Chicago. And I have a master's in medical sciences, and I'm a physician assistant, which doesn't really exist in Israel. So we can talk about that a little bit later. But I was working and teaching, and Ari works in high tech and had a comfortable job in Chicago. So it was kind of something that got put on the back burner. And I think as we got more involved and really started to discuss Aliyah as a real thing that we could do, we reached the point where, okay, we have a kid who's going into 7th grade. If we're going to do it, now's a really good time. Let's do it now. Otherwise, it's going to be hard for him. And then it's going to be, are we going to be at a bad stage? Is it going to be too hard? And so we took a leap.
Right. Who were you most worried about? Like which age boy were you most worried about making Aliyah?
So we really worried the most about our oldest two, my son Charlie, who was going into 7th grade, and my son Nady, who was going into 4th grade, because we just really thought it would be so hard for them. And it turned out that as the year progressed, we realized that it was actually harder for our younger two, our 1st grader and our pre-nursery kid. And I think it kind of caught me off guard. Like, I didn't know what to do. Like, I was totally prepared to pay for therapy and tutoring for all my kids and for me.
Right.
And suddenly I didn't know what to do with this 1st grader and this 3-year-old who were really, really struggling. And I think it caught me off guard more than I thought it would, in terms of how to help them and what to do for them. And our 7th grader and our 4th grader came and had a very smooth transition into friend groups and school, much easier than our younger kids did.
What do you think what was it that they were struggling with that was such a challenge?
So I think our older two came with some basic Hebrew knowledge. They were in day school in America and they had day school Hebrew, but they had Hebrew. And I think that they both had skills and had been put in positions in their lives where they were forced to make friends before, whether it was a new camp or a different kind of situation where they had to make friends. And I think we realized with our younger two, who didn't have Hebrew or very, very basic Hebrew, the 1st grader had Aleph Bet from kindergarten, but didn't speak any Hebrew. And the baby, who was 3, had nothing. And suddenly we threw them in, and they also didn't have the skills to make friends. And it was making friends in a totally different language. And there were just a lot of challenges for the littler two than there were for the older two.
Right. Esty, did you and your husband always talk about making Aliyah? Was that the plan from the beginning, or you kind of woke up one morning, or it was just something that you grew into? How did that look?
Yeah, so my husband definitely did. He became more religious through his Israel summer programs. So that was definitely something that, like that, Israel to him was like he had a very strong connection. I did a Shana B'Haaretz like most people. And yeah, it was something that was great in theory, but I was like, how can I move away from my family? How can, what are we going to do? And we kind of came to a crossroads when my oldest was in 4th grade, and we thought, maybe now's a good time, but gosh, he's so old. I think we kind of missed the boat. Maybe we'll just do it. Maybe we'll just like go to Israel in the summers and we'll kind of work stuff in that way. And then we moved to Cleveland, where, like I said, there's a lot of talk about Aliyah. There's shlichim, benot shirut in the schools, which was something that I didn't necessarily have in the New York area. It's not, at least when I was growing up, it wasn't like the most common thing. And, similar to what Neely was saying when she, talked about fundraising for this idea, every Yom HaAtzmaut, we would give the shir about this, and Yom HaZikaron, we would have all these very moving ceremonies. And, even amongst all the teachers, we would talk and say, like, we're talking the talk, but like, what, maybe we sort of have to take that next step. And, obviously that kind of translated into, finally making that step when we felt it was good. When our oldest was going into, 10th grade, not when we thought 4th was too old. But like I said, we can talk about that later. But yeah, it was a slow process for us, but I don't think I was ready until I was ready. So.
Right. Okay. There's something to be said for being ready when you're ready.
Yeah.
Alana, you guys? How did you said you said that your husband was less gung-ho about it, or was that you, Esty?
No, yeah, I said that my husband was more the driving force.
Did you plan to come together? You came from the same community, right?
Yeah, we didn't plan, but it was one of the best. It's amazing. Thank God we came on the same thing. Yeah, the same.
And now they live in the same. I don't think most of our audience heard, but you all live on the same floor now, right? Same building or same
for the
floor?
next few months.
And then also we didn't know that until right before either.
Oh wow!
It was very
You know,
good. That was very helpful for our kids. Something that we know that is not common. That a couple of our kids had each other, and that was very, very helpful. But we can go on. Go ahead, Alana. I'm sorry.
And you're on the same plane?
No, we came at different times. No, the
Friends were there to welcome us.
We were very lucky.
Okay, Alana, go ahead.
Yeah, so my husband was more of the driving force, not because I didn't want to necessarily live in Israel. I very much love Israel. I thought my Shana B'Haaretz that I'd end up like staying and marrying an Israeli and doing that. That didn't happen, which is okay. But life took us on a different track, and our twins were born very early, and we just couldn't, make, like everyone's saying, take that leap at that point in our lives. And we had certain things we had to care for them in America, and then but it was always obviously something important to us. And again, I guess I'll repeat what everyone's saying. We're all very involved as mechanchim, and teaching the love of Torah Israel and Ahavat Israel and all of that. At a certain point, we were like, well, when should we be, doing that for our own family? And we were lucky enough to be able to go with our family a few summers before our pilot trip. Actually, it was for Pesach with my husband's family, and that I apparently said something that my husband took it as an in, and he ran with whatever I had said, and he like started doing his homework and without me knowing. And then he kept on bringing up the idea once he had done his homework, and so he was planting that seed, which had already been planted many years ago. I guess he was watering it, if you will. And then we started strongly thinking about it, and I was a little bit involved in the homework at that point. And then we came and we made our final decision. So on our pilot trip, yeah. But I don't think if I didn't want to come, I wouldn't be here. My husband, like, we were very clear that we have to be on the same page, obviously, because I think that's a recipe for disaster if you're not both on the same page. So
I have heard of families coming where one is really into it and the other one is just being dragged along. I can't imagine. Yeah, that sounds really hard. And where do you both live?
We live in Ramat Shilo, in Ramat Shilo.
How did you decide on that community?
Esty, do you want to
take it away? Esty, you want to jump in?
So, I actually saw someone on the chat mentioning an Anglo community. So, there are different schools of thought for whether or not you should just throw yourself in completely into Israeli culture, because that's the best way to actually acclimate. And if you go into an Anglo community, maybe it's more of a crutch, and it can be harder and take longer. But we decided that that's what we wanted to do, because we just felt like already, and Esty came with her kids even older, but we felt like our oldest were already kind of old, that we needed to give them some comfort. We were ripping them out of everything that they knew. We have family here, but not immediate family. And we just felt like it was very important for them to have some type of comfort, which is language. And so that's how we started researching which communities. We went to Modi'in. Beit Shemesh was also right there. My husband had a few job, interviews, and that kind of sealed the deal for us with Ramat Shilo. And it is a wonderful community. There is a lot of Anglo, but there's Hebrew out there. We're still getting the Hebrew, but we felt like this was the right fit for us. It had the right amount of people in our hashkafa and the right amount of Anglo versus Israelis and that type of mix. And thank God the people are, very welcoming and very helpful. And we feel like it's a good fit for us, so.
I think if you ask a lot of people who come with older kids, they'll say that it's, they wanted to give their kids something, and themselves also, something a little less hard, a little less challenging. If they're already making Aliyah, then, make it a little bit smoother, if possible. Neely, was that how you decided on Modi'in?
Yes. I mean, I think we really decided. My brother lived in Beersheba and my sister lived in Modi'in, and we came with a 12-year-old. So the community in Beersheba just didn't fit our family at the time. And Modi'in did, and we really wanted to be near family. If we were already moving, and we lived next door to my mom in America and about a 10-minute walk away from my in-laws. So we were really leaving family. If we were going to leave family, we were going to come to live near family. But I think it was really important to us to find schools that could, especially with Charlie, who was our oldest going into 7th grade, that could really have the Olim help and support going forward from 7th through 12th grade to help him get what he needed in order to succeed in school and get through Bagriot and finish and feel good about himself and, feel success and be successful.
Which, by the way, is something that has come out. Like when you first make Aliyah, you're really worried about your kids and their academics and whether they're going to catch up and whether they're going to make it through the year. And you realize I don't know if it's been your experience as well, but you realize as parents of Olim kids that, and you've told people tell you this all the time also, that it's so much more important, the socialization and whether they're happy and whether they're, thriving socially, and the academics can either catch up or not, or you can help them, you can get them, help or whatever. But really, the point is to focus on making sure that they feel good about where they are and the people that they surround themselves with. Has that been your experience as well?
That's completely been our experience. For sure, the first year when we said to them, like, even to the 7th grader, we really don't care that much about academics this year. This year is about learning Hebrew and about making friends. And even as we moved forth, I think every single year it's kind of about readjusting and figuring out what your expectations are going to be and be realistic about the expectations and get them the help that they need in order to succeed.
Right. And there's a fine line. I found there's a fine line between letting things slide, letting grades slide, letting academics slide, and also kind of reinforcing that it's still important. You still need to kind of, get your work done. I mean, the first year definitely let a lot slide, but after that, I find it's a fine line between letting them hang out with their friends and socialize and focusing on that, and also reinforcing that academics is actually somewhat important, but really not as important as we thought they were back in the States, I would say. Has that been all of your experience as well, that academics may not be just one facet of life growing up in Israel?
I think the schools really, at least the schools our kids are in, really focused on education that doesn't always happen in the classroom. There's a lot of informal education, and they really love it. And it's very important, and it's a huge part of their curriculum. Tiulim and seeing and living and being is, I think, sometimes equally as important as the in-class academics. So I think the kids get that message that the socialization piece is really important. But I think that the being in a place that has Olim services has helped balance that. It's that when our kids need the push to be academic, that they have what they need, they have the pieces that they need to be able to do that.
Right. Okay. I have a couple questions here from the audience. So we talked about, we think a real Anglo community like Modine or Ra'anana makes it harder to acclimate to the language. It's funny, when we first got here, and I said my two oldest went to Ulpan, which was, whether it was a mistake or not, it doesn't make a difference. It happened. My husband is Israeli, so, and they went to day school, and they learned Ivrit, and we just assumed that their Hebrew would just take off and it'd be totally fine. But like a year or two later, my daughter said to me, if we had moved to somewhere totally Israeli, like Ashkelon or somewhere where my in-laws actually live, she said that their Hebrew would be way better than it actually is now. But because they were surrounded with Anglo friends and English speakers, they were able to kind of get comfortable and not maybe try so hard and not immerse themselves as much as they would have if they had been in a school where they were one of the very few Dovra English speakers. You know what, though, we make choices and we do what we think is best for our family, and we try the best we can, and that's all we can really do at the end of the day. I'm happy where we live. I'm glad that we chose Modine. It's been very good for all of us, and it's been good for me. If it's easier and I'm happier, then that's going to translate to also being able to help my kids more, because things for me are a little bit less challenging, and I'm not struggling throughout the day and exhausted at the end of the day trying to make my way in a fully Hebrew environment. But you know what, I always say that we make Aliyah so that our kids don't have to, so they won't have these struggles, and they can choose where to grow, where to raise their children and move to, and they can live anywhere they want in Israel. So I think that's pretty awesome. Okay, is there this is a good question. Is there an age that's too hard for children to make Aliyah? I'm told that it's really difficult for my daughter who will be high school age, as the schools don't have Ola services for high school kids, even in Ramat Beit Shemesh. What do you guys say? The ones, those of you who made Aliyah with teenagers. That's all three of you.
Yeah.
Is there an age that's too old?
I really think it depends on the kid. I think you have to know your kid. There are schools, particularly in the Ramat Beit Shemesh, in the Beit Shemesh area, but in Jerusalem for sure. I don't know so much about the Modi'in Chashmo area, but in terms of schools, but there are definitely schools that are set up for Olim support. And I would say, it sounds like I don't know, it sounds like this whole thing is like move to an Anglo community considering where we're all living. But I think one of the draws, especially with older kids, is to be in a school, to choose a school that you're not going to have to be the ones telling them, oh wait, my kids are Olim and this is what they should get. They should have like a support system already, and this is what we do with Olim, and this is how we deal with it, because you have a lot of other things to do, like read your bills in Hebrew. So you don't want to be telling the principal, by the way, I think my kid gets extra time. By the way, I think, like, they should already know. Now with, if you're coming with much younger kids, so I would say, I don't know how popular this is, but I would say go as Israeli as you as a parent can handle it, and your Hebrew, and your Hebrew can, because you also need a social life and you also need to navigate the world. But I think it's true that, like what your daughter said, if you would have lived in Ashkelon, then whatever, then her Hebrew would have been better, or maybe acclamation, or who knows. Right, who knows exactly? We have no idea. But certainly even within an Anglo community, there are schools that are more American and more Israeli. So, you can make that choice and still have your own Anglo kind of social life, and but sure. I do think that
Neely and I have two
schools.
different, for example, we have two different boys schools, or two different high schools that we could set our boys to. We have Amit and we have Lapid B'nai Akiva Yeshiva. And I think, Neely, you chose B'nai Akiva because there were really good Olim services at the time. I mean, still.
Right. I mean, I think we're here almost 7 years. We're here 6.5 years. So I think things have totally changed within Modi'in, but we chose the yeshiva because there were better Olim services at the time. Right. And like Esty said, they told my kid what he got. I almost didn't have to research to be like, this is what I think he deserves. They told me, and I was like, oh, okay, great, thanks.
Right. On the other hand, it does take us Anglos a while to realize how much we have to advocate for our children, whether or not the school's set up. They could be set up with the best, systems in place and support for your kids, for your kids' specific needs, and for Olim. But one thing that I think that we all need to learn a lot quicker than we actually do, myself included, and I've spent a lot of time in Israel, and my husband's Israeli, etc., is that you really need to fight. You need to really use your voice. If you don't have a voice, you got to use that voice. The funny thing is, so my daughter started in 5th grade, so she was in that Ulpan school, and then she switched to the local school in 6th grade. And 6th grade is the last year of elementary school, and they have like the end of year things and graduation and a year trip, this Til Shnati, etc. So one of the first meetings at school for 6th grade, I went to the parent teachers meetings, but the group one, and I'm sitting there, and the parents are just screaming at the teacher, just like yelling at the teacher, and everyone's raising their, and I understand everything because my Hebrew is very good, but I didn't understand where this aggression was coming from, where the anger was coming from. And so I asked afterwards I asked one of the parents, and they said, oh, well, we have a lot more dues to pay this year. So we want to all need to make sure that, our money is going to what it's supposed to be going to. And, so we get very assertive about, making sure that the money goes to what it needs to go to. It's not spent on this or that or whatever. And so she said, money talks. That was her explanation. I was thinking, like, I just came from a school where you basically pay $30,000 to send your kid, and we would never in a million years speak to a parent like this, no matter how much we were paying and how much they were getting paid. That never would factor into it. It would never, even occur to us to like raise our voice at the teacher. But that's what she said. She said, money talks. And, now that there's more money at stake here, and we're, talking about paying more dues, we need to advocate for our children. I thought that was very interesting. I was like, that's really kind of flip there.
I don't know if Esty and Alana can say the same thing, but I think when it came to advocating for my kids, the best thing that happened to me were WhatsApp groups that were other English speaking parents, that I could kind of use that as a sounding board to say, okay.
I have to jump in here and say that Neely is the one who translates for all of us Anglos and makes sure that we are all on top of our to-dos and things that are owed and things we need to submit.
But
and
I
homework.
feel like those WhatsApp groups were so helpful and continue to be helpful, where parents can use it to say, like, okay, this is happening in schools. It's only happening to my kid.
Right.
Who am I supposed to speak to? What's the number of the yoetset? Who
Right.
is the yoetset? Who's the principal? Who's the teacher?
Yeah.
Like, what? Where are they going? Do my kids have school tomorrow? Don't they have
Yeah.
school tomorrow? Like, all of these little details that kind of sometimes fall through the cracks, because like Esty said, you're busy reading your bills in Hebrew. Sometimes you can't read every email in Hebrew.
Yeah.
But
Which,
I think
by the way, Nefesh B'Nefesh has a service, Translation Tuesdays. So if you ever need help with your bills.
Good to know. Thank you.
Use us.
but I do think those WhatsApp groups did help with that, advocate for your own kid. And it kind of helped ease sometimes Olim have this issue where people are so willing to help, but we don't even know where we need help.
Ask.
Like, I don't even know the question to ask.
No.
And then, like I sent my kid to school with a Ma'adan the first year. And like, I looked up what Ma'adan was, and like, Ma'adan was like a treat. It was Shavuot. Send your kid with a Ma'adan. So I sent my kid with a Ma'adan, except like a Ma'adan is a pudding. And like the Ganenet called and was like, your kid doesn't have the right food. I was like, oh my God.
Wait, what was it supposed to be?
It was supposed to be a pudding, and I sent him with like a granola bar because I thought Ma'adan was like a treat.
Oh, a snack, like a treat.
A treat.
That's true.
And like she called, and stupid Olim parents, you sent your kid with the wrong. Gonna note her a little bit harsh. Maybe that's why the little one has such a hard time. Gonna note her sometimes more harsh than like
traumatized.
The Rav in 7th grade. I don't know. He was much more understanding than the Ganenet, who was like the day after Sukkot. Why is your kid in a t-shirt and shorts? It's Choref. I'm like,
oh well,
it's not winter. It's 80 degrees.
Not for Chicago.
Outside.
Not if you're from Chicago, it isn't.
I'm like, if we came from Chicago, it's 80 degrees. Like long pants and an undershirt. And she's like, it's Choref. I was like, okay, I guess
Poor
I'll
neglected
send him.
Americans.
So I do think that that's where like sometimes we don't know what to ask, and our friends and other English speakers were really helpful, which is another benefit of living in a community with other people who make you comfortable.
Yeah, true. Not that we want to be added to yet another WhatsApp group, but sometimes it can be very helpful. I always make sure to open, if one isn't open already, but I always open the English WhatsApp group for our class, and then bring in all of the Anglos so that, because I know Neely will be in there and translate everything for us.
If you open the group, then I'll translate, Char.
Right. If you build it, Neely will translate. So, okay, I have a couple of other questions here. Talk about public school versus private school options. Is everyone who is modern Orthodox sent to private? Does it depend on the community? I can answer from our community. I don't know what it's like around.
Probably it depends on the community. I think it's a mix here. Alana, would you say that it's a mix? Some people send to private and some people send to public. I think depending on what you're comfortable with and what the hashkafa, so to speak, is of each of those schools. I think it differs depending on the community.
Would you say the Mamlachti Dati or the Torani, like public school in your area, is of a different hashkafa than a Torani public school in a different area, like in our area?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. Alana, do you know?
I don't know. Honestly, I find that I'm still getting used to things at school because, our first year here was interrupted mid-year and it's still been kind of wonky. So I'm still getting familiar with, I saw in one of our GAN WhatsApp chats about bringing a potato to school. And I didn't know because last year, that's when, Corona first hit. And so we weren't in school, Erev Pesach. And so it turns out my daughter didn't need her karpas, but, I'm still getting familiar with our own school, but yeah. So I don't really have to.
It is different in every community.
I know in our Yeah.
Hmm?
No, sorry. I was gonna say it probably reflects the flavor of the neighborhood.
Yeah.
You know, what would be comfortable for everyone. But I
Yeah,
can't
I would
say.
think so.
I
I
think
think
that
there's,
for us, it was our neighborhood, and Shar, you probably can attest to this. I think there's
Yeah.
a mix, and I think there's a lot of overlap with the people that send their kids to the Mamlachti Dati school versus the Torani school. I think there's a lot of overlap. Lots of families have their kids in both schools because one fits one kid better socially than the other. So I do think that at least in Modi'in, there's a lot of overlap. I think for us, one of the major decisions between the Mamlachti Dati and the Torani school was the size of the class. That the Torani school, because it was at that year, the last
New
couple of
and
years, very,
exciting.
very, very like wanted, the
Right.
classes were much bigger. And so we had to choose for a fourth grader, a class
Right.
that was going to be 39 boys versus a class that was going to be 22 or 23. And
Right.
22 or 23 for a fourth grader makes a huge difference in terms of the attention that he's going to get in school, and the teacher being able to point out and signal where he needs help and where he doesn't need help. And it was
Right.
the same for our first grader. So that kind of drove our decision making in terms of schools.
Right. So when Neely's talking about Torani, she's talking about the local private school that's a little hashkafically a little bit more religious than, let's say, the Mamlachti Dati, the religious public school in our neighborhood. They're very close by each other also. I would say that our public religious school where we send our kids is a lot more mixed than the private Torani. I think in terms of like just people, like the gradation of hashkafa is a lot wider, a lot broader than the Torani private school. But everyone makes their own kind of decisions. Someone asked about cost, actual cost of school. What's the actual cost of school?
Not
I think
like
that also
America.
depends. I think that
Now, you
also
have to
depends.
buy your own books. There's also a book lending program.
And they may not use
So,
that.
which hasn't made it to every community, right? The book lending program.
We have it.
We have
We
that.
have it at our school. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's
where you
made it
pay
to
like a flat fee and they give
Yeah.
you, you kind of just pick them up, but you're not going to be able to do that your first year because they set it up in May.
That's
Yeah.
true. Maybe we should work on that. We should be able to like accommodate for that. Yeah. So I would say.
But also your first year, your kids are probably not taking all of the classes anyway. So you
That's
probably just want to get like math and a chumash or something because they're going to be in Ulpan and,
there's also discounts for people in their first 3 years, I think,
First
right?
3
Of
years of
Aliyah?
tuition.
First
Yeah.
3 years. Yeah, which is
For
funny. 'Cause-
tuition?
really?
Yeah, guys, work on that. If you haven't done that, go get your discount.
Everyone's with us.
Yeah, we have one more year.
It used to be that it didn't kick in into your second year. It
Second
had
year?
to do it's the money that the school gets back, I think, from Misrad HaChinuch or something like that for Olim. So
Mhm.
it kicked in your second
Right.
year. So you would get it your second, third, and fourth year
This
of
is
Aliyah.
instead of the Ulpan that I sent my kids to.
Yes.
Got
But
it,
now
okay.
I think I heard that it starts your first year. So you guys should have gotten it last year. So go
I mean,
back
we
to
have
school and
Ulpan,
complain.
so I don't know.
You can
Right.
email answers@nbn.org.il and someone will help you figure that out.
Again, our first couple of years have been Corona, Zoom, whatever. So
Right.
I don't think it is what it is. It's fine.
Still look into it. So
But
yeah,
they were asking about costs.
cost. So I would say a couple of thousand for a shekel for the year, all told. With
Unless you're in a private school or a special, a
books and
school with,
books and right.
I think there are certain schools certainly here that, maybe are more therapeutic or have more support on staff. So certainly those are going to be more. They're still not going to be, American prices, but they'll be for sure at least double what they, what a regular, whatever, what your standard, I should say, school is.
Okay.
But also,
yeah.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, while, there's not really customer service, you're not paying. So there's really no, they're not looking to retain you as a client, so to speak.
Right.
So that's something to get used to in terms of, your kid is one of 30, 40 teachers for Misrat HaChinuch are very, very overworked, very, very underpaid. And there you can get lucky and sometimes you can't, and whatever.
That goes
So
back
there's
to
always next year.
advocating and pushing and, you know, being assertive and, you know, making sure.
100%.
And the more kids you have, the you know, the harder it is, because you're just constantly on the phones asking
Goes back to the WhatsApp group. WhatsApp is like a very normal way to communicate with a teacher, with a parent, all of
with your doctor.
With your doctor. Yeah.
Oh yes, I make orthodontist appointments with the WhatsApp. Like, hey, when can I come in? Okay, cool. What? It's very weird.
Okay, this is a good one. As moms, I'm currently working full time. Is this possible? Where'd it go? Hold on. Would you say it's possible to work full time the first year after making Aliyah? Young children and the transition, is it possible to work full time? I can say that I started working in full time in February after we met Aliyah in August, and I was happy that on one hand I was happy to have that time to help my kids settle, to help us settle. But at the same time, I was also looking for a job that whole time. So it wasn't like I said to myself, okay, I won't start looking until, but maybe I should have. If you can, I would say, if you have the resources and the ability to push off your job, starting to work for a few months, I definitely would do that if you have that luxury.
Or at least work American hours if you can, right, so that you're like around, if that's at all a possibility.
Right. Right. But did any of you start working full time right away when you first made Aliyah?
I worked part-time and I did Ulpan, like the private Ulpan, not the full-time Ulpan. It was a lot. And I don't know, I probably wouldn't recommend it, but you know, if you, like you said, it's a luxury not to be able not to. I can't speak Hebrew or English. It's a problem. Anyway,
that's what happens to all of us. Happens to the best of us. People don't speak any language.
We both came with jobs from America.
Right.
I had my job for the first year, and Ari kept his job from America for the first couple years. So,
did you take a break at all?
So
when you first got here?
No, but I was working it was very part-time. I was teaching full-time in America in a PA program in a university in Chicago, and brought part of it here. And so I was working very part-time, and I was working very part-time American hours, and Ari was also working American hours. So we did Ulpan together in the morning, and then he worked full-time American hours, and then I would, you know, when I could fit in hours, but totally on an American schedule. And then I started working an Israeli job in February, but also part-time. And I think that being able to do part-time and have the other time to be home with the kids was important for us our first year. And Ulpan was important. Even though I came with really good Hebrew, I thought it was a really important piece of our Aliyah. First of all, because we went to school every day. So when our kids were like, I don't want to go to school, it's terrible. We're like, sorry, we're going to school. You're going to school. It's hard for everybody. We're all leaving the house. No one's staying home.
Right.
And I think it was a good transition for us to be with other people who were doing exactly what we were doing when we were doing it. We all had to write our first note to the teacher at the same time. And we all needed to learn how to shop for Rosh Hashanah at the same time, and get our first electric bill and pass the driving test, and all of these things that we were all doing together. And there was good camaraderie, even if these weren't our best friends. It was just this sense of, I don't know, group doing it together.
Yeah. And a lot of people do make their best friends in Ulpan, and some people don't. Next question. Let's see. I'd love to hear about your transition with teenagers. We spoke a little bit about that, but what would you say was your biggest challenge with teenagers in your first year?
I want to go for it.
Anyone have?
Sorry, I feel like I'm talking a lot. Go. Okay, people are waiting.
Go for it,
all right, I think, I don't know, biggest challenge? In a weird way, I think having to go onto Zoom in the middle of our kids' first year of school was almost like a great break for them. Like they had worked.
Oh, it was good.
It was like, no, it was really good, which is terrible to say because it was for a terrible reason of a pandemic. But it was like, it was so intense. until, like for, that whole time. And then they were like, okay, we're on Zoom. Now we all know what Zoom was and is, and oh God. But like at that point where they were able to just stay home and it was okay, that was good. Because I think getting used to, wherever you were at in school in America as a teenager, and now you're that new kid who doesn't really know what's going on. You're pulled out of this class. You're, by the time their Ulpan schedule actually matched properly to where they were supposed to be and where they weren't. And, oh, I thought I wasn't. And really, did you think you weren't in that class? They learn how to play the schedule also. So that kind of school transition was a little bit complicated, because also their English class, as much as they're in the top English class, you're still with kids who were born to American parents in Israel. So your reading and language skills are very different than kids who have been in American high school. So, there's that, like, just dealing with the attitude of like, this is ridiculous. Okay, but wait, you have to pay attention in biology because it's all in Hebrew, So there's that was a challenge. Let's say one of.
One of. Alana, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think just in general, sending them and knowing that it was going to be hard for them, and that, and not being able to know if, how they're feeling, and is it because they're a teenager, or because they're a teenager that made Aliyah, or because they're a teenager that made Aliyah that's going through Corona. It's hard to kind of, know why they're acting up or what is difficult for them for what reason. But I think overall their challenges are just like all my kids' challenges, just learning to make friends and trying to, understand what's going on around you and feel comfortable with yourself. And I don't really know if I answered the question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you are. I mean,
But,
listen, these are all issues that they would have to deal with anywhere they are. It's just amplified when they're dealing with a different language and a different culture, and
Right.
big change like that.
Right. Definitely being in an Anglo community, sorry, Neely, helped them find friends easily. And that was, going back to what we were saying before, socializing is more important, and, just learning the language. So that helped them. Of course, I find my teenagers are learning just all the slang words in Hebrew the best, as opposed to all the important Hebrew words they should know. But
those are the important Hebrew words they should know.
I think for us, like, we came from a small private school in Chicago, small classes, and we brought our 7th grader to a school where there were 900 boys, 150 boys his age, and like sent him to school the first day. And we're like, bye, have a great day. And I remember he closed the car door, and like I pulled away and cried, like I did probably when I dropped him off at kindergarten the first time. And I was like, oh my God, what have I done to my child? There are 900.
Well, that's the thing. That's the difference between dropping them off. But Neely, that's the difference between dropping them off in kindergarten and dropping them off, it's in 7th grade in Israel, in a new country, because in kindergarten, you got to do this. Everyone's got to drop them off for kindergarten, and you're not ruining them for life. But here, when I mean, I hate to say it, but like that's the kind of worry and anxiety that we as parents have. I think we always will, until we see them flourishing. And
he walked out of school the first day and got back in the car, like 4 hours later. He's like, Ima, this is the greatest school ever. And I was like, what? I did not expect. I was like bracing myself for the 4 hours that he was in school for him to get in the car, and he would cry. And he's like, this is the greatest school ever.
Thank God it was the same day that you were able to.
But I do think that for him, the greatest challenge of the teenager was he came at 12. He came 10 months before his bar mitzvah. And I think he had set himself with personal expectations of what he wanted to do for his bar mitzvah. And I'm going to lean a whole parsha, and I'm going to daven, and I'm going to do this. And I think he had to also change some of those personal expectations to the thing that he just couldn't do everything. And he had to figure out what were some of the things that were most important to him, and some of the things that he had to kind of change his own personal expectations to be able to just function. Going to school every day was exhausting. It was emotionally exhausting. It was psychologically exhausting. It was exhausting. And I think for him, one of the biggest challenges was and this doesn't happen anymore. So anyone thinking about moving to Modi'in, this doesn't happen anymore, but they used to put the Olim in a class with kids that were not in a special needs class, but like kind of just above the special needs class. So they had behavioral issues and learning issues, and they just kind of tossed all the Olim in there, figuring the class will go a little bit slower, so that's going to be good for the Olim. But these were like Olim kids that didn't have social issues, didn't have behavioral issues, didn't have learning issues, and they could not make friends with the kids in their class. So it kind of separated these three. Charlie came with two other Olim, these three kids. It kind of made them separate in this class and totally different in this class. And so I think that that was a big challenge for him. And it kind of took a lot for him to finally have a conversation with the teacher that said, like, yes, I know my Hebrew isn't perfect, but this class isn't good for me. Like, I need to be in a place where I can make friends.
And that's huge for a 12-year-old to be able to say.
Yeah. So I do think
and that's
that was
first
one of
lesson
the
in being an assertive Israeli.
Right.
Anyone else want to add something before I go to the next question?
Can I add one thing? I'm sorry.
Yes,
First of all, my
course.
internet just blinked out for a minute. I'm sorry. You were saying about the different levels of class, or they put the Olim kids with differing levels. I think that's one thing, just in terms of advocating for your child. Any difficult, if you have a child like we do with who's coming from America with an IEP, with any learning disabilities, it's a very, very, very different process here. And you really need to be that advocate, because it's very easy to just be lumped under, oh, it's a language gap. And it's like, no, because in English, they also had this issue, so that's something that, to keep in mind, that it's very easy for a teacher to say, oh, if they just sit in the class and get the language, they'll understand. And, you kind of need to be saying, no, actually they won't, because they did that in their native language and they didn't. So
it's really,
just
really
in terms
important.
of advocating.
Yeah, that's really, really, really important to know. I'm glad you brought that up. Oftentimes also, like what happened with my son, he came in 2nd grade, and in 1st grade in America, the teacher had said, like, okay, maybe there's a little bit of something, let's keep an eye on it. And then we moved, right? So then we made Aliyah. And for the first year, it's Aliyah, and it's a new language and it's a whole new thing. And who knows, what's going on. And the next year, they still kind of chalk it up to still learning new. And by the time he was diagnosed with dyslexia, it was 4th or 5th grade, and it was a little like late, not late, but it's hard to tell the difference between a learning disability or just language acquisitions. Some people just learn languages easier or not as easy. So yeah, there's a lot to keep on top of, and it's definitely, if you already have a diagnosis or papers or anything that says anything, bring them with you and wave them in front of the teachers and make sure that they acknowledge and work on getting that translated. And
and use the other parents in the community who've gone through it to kind of guide you, to help you do it in your own particular community. Because I think every school system and every city has different whatever, and go with the parents that have done it before.
Yeah, for sure. And now it's so easy with Facebook groups and WhatsApp groups where you can, ahead of even getting here, ahead of arrival, you could, start the balls in motion and figure out who to speak to and where the right office is and what, what to do and who to get the psychodidacty done, the different assessments, etc. So it's much easier now, I would think, than it was before the start of social media, where you really just were on your own. So now, like, ask, you may be shy, but you kind of got to get over that also. There's work to be done as a parent. And, parents
easier to get it done over WhatsApp.
True. Yeah. That's a nice thing about WhatsApp, is they can get it done over WhatsApp. You don't necessarily have to have Facebook either, because you can find you find the Neely in the community. That's my advice to all the Olim out there. Pinpoint who the Neely is and hone in on that one person.
Shara's not giving herself enough credit, because I did, and I don't know if Esty and Alana both probably felt the same way. Like, I came from being really active in my own community and like plopped myself into this new community, and at some point had this realization that if I don't get involved, like there's a part of me that's like not doing what I feel like I'm supposed to do. And it was actually Shara who got me to do my first act of chesed after making Aliyah. So I
What
drove
was it?
Shara and Alicia to the doctor.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember coming home, and we had been here probably 2 weeks, a week and a
Yeah.
half. And I remember coming home and saying to Ari, like, today was such a good day. I feel so good. And he's like,
So glad.
well,
you
what do
said
you feel good about? And I'm like, I feel useful. Like, I feel like I gave to somebody else, and that made me feel.
You're
So
welcome.
you have to find your place also. So, Shari,
No,
you don't.
that is huge. You're right, because a lot of who we are is actually stripped away when we first arrive. The first few years after we arrived, I remember being very impressed with you, Neely, that you were like, you would kind of like, to me, it seemed like it took me like maybe 3 years to really just kind of like finally like talk to other people and like, start advocating and start, being myself again. But you just like dove right in. I was really impressed by that. It's important to get back to yourself and find yourself again. I mean, come here, a lot of us come in like midlife, and it's a really weird foreign experience to start all over again. Even if it was moving states and you still had the language, etc., that would be something. But like coming here and just completely, having to be on your best behavior and make friends and socialize, and also, get your kids acclimated and work on all that. It's a lot. It's definitely a lot. Anyway, moving on. What else? We did that. We talked about private schools. Coming from a house with lots of space, a backyard, etc. Would you say it's important to find a duplex type home instead of an apartment in terms of helping the kids have a happy transition?
I
cannot speak to that because
I think that the weather here is so nice all the time. The kids all want to be outside with their friends, not in our house and not in our backyard and not on our porch. They like want to hang out at the park. So I think that like space here takes on a very different. I think it just takes on a very different importance because the kids leave. They go to hang out with their friends other places because nobody has the space to accommodate the 20 kids that want to hang out together. Okay, Corona, nobody wants 20 kids anywhere, but like barring Corona, like in normal life, no one has the space to have 20 kids.
Right.
So they just find other places to hang out.
Yeah, that's true. I remember for the first year, my youngest was running around other people's houses looking for the stairs to their basement. And he kept asking like, where's your basement? Where's your basement? Like, don't have a basement.
Right.
Clean.
I think outside space is much more important here.
Yeah.
Whether it's your own or not. Of course, I mean, that took on a different meaning during quarantine when you couldn't go anywhere but your own house, but that hopefully will not be the case for anybody on this call or on this webinar. But yeah, it's a totally different experience. We coming from Cleveland, you're coming from Chicago and even New York in terms of climate, it's just a totally different experience. Needing the inside space is not as important as the outside space, public or private.
So as the American parent, you're always like, do I let my kids go hang out in the park with their friends who I barely know? But the first time,
yes,
a kid comes to the door asking for your kid to collect them, you're like, yes, please take my child. This is the best thing that's ever happened. And you throw them out the door. So all that goes out the door.
I'm sure it depends on the neighborhood and community, but I think overall, yes.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I mean, I still see on Facebook groups, Anglos asking about, my kids being out until certain hours of the night, and American parents are just a lot less used to letting their kids go out, and the independence that we actually haven't touched about that on that at all. But every time I interview a teenager and asking how they're doing in Israel and whether or not they, they're happy here or not, the main thing that they bring up is the independence that they have here they never had where they were living in the States. Taking the buses, meeting up with friends who they met from other cities, going by themselves to just the Makolet, if it was a 12-year-old like walking down the street type of thing. The kids are a lot more independent here than they are anywhere else.
Definitely.
It's hard sometimes for Americans to let that go, but you kind of take a deep breath, go over all the safety rules and let them go with their phone, because everyone has a phone here from I don't know about what's that?
I was gonna say it definitely depends on whether you live in a city or on a yeshuv or in a smaller, so it's probably dependent on where you are.
Yeah, Yeah, probably also, yeah. And whether or not you let your kids have a phone or not, there's something to be said for, for safety, for having your kids having a phone. And then there's, of course, other reasons not to give them a phone, but there's all different ways to figure that out. Do we have anything else you want to add? Anything? What's the top advice that you would like to pass along to people like you who are thinking about making Aliyah with kids, your kids' age, in your stage of life? What do you feel like they should know that maybe either you didn't know or you didn't realize, or you did know but you feel like they should know? Neely?
Wow. I think both parents being on board is really important, especially if you have teenagers. I think your teenagers can totally sense when one parent does or doesn't want this more than the other. So I think that that's really important. But I think kind of finding a place where you have a support system, either family or friends, or having a support system for you as much as for your kids is really like the most important piece.
Right. And you can create a support system before you arrive. If you don't know anybody in the neighborhood or in the community you're moving to, get on the WhatsApps, get on the Facebook groups, and start, saying, hey, we're arriving, summer 2021, and we're going to be living in here. These are my kids' ages, etc. I would say don't wait for people to come to you. Put yourself out there, put yourself forward, especially if not for yourself, then for your children. When I used to stalk our database and add families. I probably should still do this. I would add families to our local Facebook group. I would ask the permission first, of course. But I would introduce them on our local Facebook group, and then you see like everyone chime. What's nice about living in a mixed, in a mixed Olim community is that everyone kind of chimes in. Oh, welcome! I live here. Oh, you live in my street. Oh, you live in my building. Welcome! I have kids who are going to be in your kids' class, and they just start. It just starts kind of taking off from there, which is a nice thing to do. Before you even arrive, you can do that, and just kind of get to know who's going to be in your area. They'll add you to the neighborhood WhatsApp group. It's all these things are little things that you can do to get your community started even before you arrive. SD, do you have any advice for people like you who may be on the fence or are wondering about what it looks like to make Aliyah with kids your age?
Sure. I would say, I don't know how many people have this opportunity, whether Corona or not, but if I saw a couple of those questions in the chat, if you're able to make your kids part of maybe not a pilot trip, but a kind of trip, or at least in this case, like Zoom with people that might be in their class or something. So much, at least for me and for my kids, so much of the anxiety was in the unknown, and like, but what is our house going to look like? And where are we going? And what is shul going to be like? Is it going to be totally different? Everything just totally different. If they have something to picture, then it's certainly much easier for them. And that was something that we tried to do, whether we made that full decision or not. My husband would take our two oldest, who obviously were our oldest when we came, every summer to, and again, if you have that ability to do that, it wasn't an unknown for them. They knew where they were going and what it meant. They didn't really know what it meant, but they at least could picture where they were going, and that, kind of planting the seeds in that way. If you're able to do any little bit of that, I think that goes a long way. It doesn't fix everything for sure, but it certainly goes a long way.
I like that idea. Someone could just walk around with, WhatsApp video or something and just show them what their neighborhood looks like at the parks. Especially the parks are amazing in most of our neighborhoods. We're going to wrap up in a few minutes. There's one more question that we didn't get to. Homework. How do you help your kids with homework? The first year.
Alana, I know Alana's super homework mom and Zoom mom.
Oh yeah?
She's always on. Go for it.
What was the question?
How do you help your kids with well, first of all, did you have any advice that you want to pass on to, or tips?
I would say I don't have one specific piece of advice, but rather just a chizuk to, all of you out there that are planning on coming or unsure, that there are definitely a lot of ups and downs. And you just have to find those ups to carry you through the downs, because the downs can be really low, but the ups can be really high. And it definitely helps that, I came with a really close friend, but you just, you get through it and you realize why you're here. So more than happy to speak to people further, you know, beyond the webinar. But, you know, we feel very lucky, thank God, to be here. So.
Okay, well, thank you for offering that. If you don't mind, we'll put your emails in the follow-up emails from whoever registered for the webinar, which is great. There was one more question about homework. If you guys have any tips about how to help your kids with homework the first year or two, because it's hard as a.
I think on my Hebrew is okay. It is hard. A lot of asking, using those WhatsApp parent groups of fellow Anglo parents who are there to help you, who know the drill already. I use Google Translate a lot. My Hebrew was good enough to know when the translation was
Right.
off or when it was spot on. And a lot of teachers, like you said, advocate, but a lot of teachers are comfortable, at least from our experiences so far, WhatsApping them or calling them to ask them,
nice.
you know,
They're
what am
very
I supposed to
accessible.
do? Yeah, so just doing your best and also making your expectations a little bit lower than they might have been before. And
in
we do
terms
our
of quality
best
of homework,
and
you're
expressing
saying.
that, to the kids also, like, we're going to do as much as we can. And I know for me, like, I would tell my kids if they were frustrated, I'll reach out to the teacher. I'll tell them we did, you know, X, Y, and Z, and it'll be okay.
Yeah.
Most of the time it was.
Yeah, and usually is, because also most teachers are so impressed that these kids came and are doing what they're doing, that they're usually pretty kind about everything.
That is one thing about some Israeli teachers, that they're very impressed with Olim in general. They like can't imagine, they can't fathom, like, why did you leave America? You know, like, why are you coming? Wow, you're amazing. We're like, oh, okay. Like, it's just funny. So there is that leeway for sure. I'm sorry, you wanted to end it though. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Our pleasure. Thank you so much.
One thing about homework, I think, is differentiating between homework that's review and that your kids should be able to do on their own versus homework that the teacher may be giving that the kid doesn't know how to do. And so I've differentiated between those two. Also, like Alana said, calling the teacher and speaking to the teacher and being like, if my kid didn't understand it in class, I can't reteach what you taught in class. If this is supposed to be a review, it's not working for my kid. You didn't get it. So also, like, kind of speaking to the teacher, but being able to differentiate between.
I would also ask for a buddy, for a homework, but, you know, for another kid, an Israeli kid in the class who is a good student, who is kind, who can maybe buddy up with your kid. Also, that helps with the you know, there's always some growing pains in classes with Olim and Israelis, or usually if it's one or two Olim and most are Israelis, it's sometimes hard because the Israelis aren't told, like, oh, listen, you know, there's some Olim who are coming into the class, and maybe be nice to them and pull them aside and ask them if they need help. They're not told any of that. So it would be nice that the teachers, I've actually asked teachers to, you know, make a little announcement, try to be nice to the new Olim kids, maybe, you know, buddy up with them or find someone to sit next to, and maybe seat them actually next to a kid who might be helpful and more kind than maybe some other kids might be. That's always helpful. Thank you everybody for being on this. This is a lot of fun. Nice to meet you all. And if anyone has any questions that we didn't get to, you can always email Aliyah, ALIYAH, at mbn.org.il. We're happy to put you in touch with anyone who can help you answer those questions. And we will send emails of Esty, Alana, and Neely in the follow-up email of this webinar, so you can continue to bug them with your questions and learn how to advocate for your kids before making Aliyah. That's what it's all about. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Have a good night.
Bye. Have a good night.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Kasher v'Sameach.